I sang all those songs that I'd never sung before. I blessed the rich, gave my heart the poor.
Welcome to today's episode of Labor and the Expression of Worth, where we are exploring our creative nature. Today, I'm going to speak with Matt McUne here in Amarillo, Texas. My name is Trav, and I am celebrating your creative nature. Strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Depth tribes feed the world. Labor and the expression of worth.
Driver, step out of your vehicle.
Remember that one time he pulled me over when you were a police officer?
I wouldn't.
Yeah, you're like, whoop, whoop, whoop. But see,
Hi, my name's Trav, and I've been traveling. To the ones whose brokenness demanded attention, may you sing out the dreams of the people. This is my brother. He took his own life about 2.5 years ago. I'm trying to have the conversation now that him and I couldn't have. Lost more than found.
here's your clutch.
Oh man, you got gears? Whoa. Okay, so you got the exhaust pipe coming down here, and we got a clutch on the left, just like a motorcycle, right? And you got these, it's like a 10-speed handlebars turned upside down. This thing has just been reworked.
Yeah.
So interesting. We are all playing our parts in this great composition. That's me, the little guy there, Traveling Trav. My dad is filming, the guy behind the camera, and that's my mom right there on the steps. Watch out, little Trav. That concrete is hard. I was deeply influenced by the children's television on PBS. Fred Rogers, he wanted us to all know that we are lovable and capable of loving. It's okay to be curious, to ask questions. Empathy and generosity of spirit are great strengths. My brother, just before he died, he was trying to open up a conversation with me. He wanted to talk about shame. He tried to approach it several times with me, but he could only back away. In the face of our loss, many of us have now made a renewed commitment to life. As an act of conscious resistance to empire, we are aligning our labor with our innate worth.
In the training, they had this special room that was set up like a ship. It was designed so they could fill it with water. And it had a bunch of holes, a bunch of pipes running through that had holes in them and holes in the side of the wall. And you basically travel through this room. You start on this side, and then you go into this other compartment that's filling up with water, and then you have to go upstairs through basically a ladder and a porthole. And they have the upstairs filled with about 3 feet of water. And so you open up the porthole, and this water comes rushing down, and then everybody in the room has to get out through that water pouring down. It's understandably a little challenging. I had this epiphany at one point.
Many of us gratefully accepted our mental illness diagnosis. In fact, we felt validated that the hell we'd been experiencing could be named. With great hope, we finally accepted the help from the medical establishment. We ingested the meds that we were told would allow us to integrate into the status quo. We worked the available programs, we did our breathing exercises, we said our prayers. We surrendered our attitude problems. We listened to all the good teachers and the people we love. We educated ourselves. We served our communities. We learned to love our enemies. We continue to pray for those who have hurt us. We exercised our bodies and we exercised our minds. We went to treatment centers. We gave all we had to our spouses and significant others. We demanded of ourselves that we participate in the establishment. We listened. We came to respect what is. Many people told us that we were enough. Our friends said to us, "I wish you could see the beauty that I see in you." We embodied the beginner's mind over and over again, and it was beautiful over and over again. Finally, we realized that we are not quite as sick as we thought we had to be. All of our work is now paying off. We are bearing fruit, profound nourishment. And now it is time to share. It is not a sign of wellness to be well adapted to a sick culture. It's true, some of us are a little bit more sensitive to the toxicity of our times, but psychiatry is coming to understand the error of its ways. We thought we could medicate the symptoms of an ailing civilization. That didn't work. Now it's time that we get to the root.
I had this epiphany at one point. This hole appeared. It had a little cover on it, but when the water pressure got strong enough, it popped off. The guy in charge, I don't remember what rank he was, he was telling people what to do. You guys go repair that pipe, because there was a pipe and that was leaking, and so you had to put a little clamp, a certain clamp thing on it. Well, he looked at me, and I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time. He looked at me and he said, "Put your back against that hole." I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I sort of wiggled in, because it was between two pieces of metal. I don't remember what, it was kind of a tight spot. So I wiggled into there and I put my back against the wall and stopped the leak. And I felt the water pressure building up behind my back. And I had to hold myself in place. And I remember thinking, if I was on a real ship, this is how I would die. And it just was like, am I okay with this? Can I die like this? I'm like, if I have to, I'll do it. And it was just this weird thing. It was like, okay, I've accepted this. This is my role. If this is where I end up, then this is how it's going to be.
I guess that's what the training is for.
I guess so. Yeah, it's like
introduce you to those thoughts
this
and feelings.
may be where you die.
Right.
So get used to the idea.
Right, you're going to be the one who's going to stay here while we get
While
out of
we
here.
escape, you got to hold this hole.
Many of us have done the required work. It is no longer an option for us to sit quietly on the sidelines with our diagnosis. Finally, we have realized our own worth. There is a wisdom that is now coming forth from us. We are the ones who were sidelined by our sensitivity. But because of the great love that has been channeled through you and into us, we are still here. Some of us are still dying, it is true. And some of us have already left this world, but there are quite a few of us who have made it this far. Those of us who would have been dead or hopelessly embittered 50 years ago. We may have gratefully accepted our diagnosis, but we learned a really terrible lesson in that. We know now that we are not to identify with the diagnosis that comes from for-profit pharmaceutical companies. We were given medicines in an attempt to pacify us. We took the medicines because we desperately wanted to be relieved of our painful calling. No one wants to be the one wailing in the wilderness. No one wants to be marginalized. The medicines couldn't fix us because there's nothing wrong to fix. Our greatest teachers have helped us to understand that everything is the path to awakening. And in this tradition, I am reimagining Bipolar 1. Bipolarity is the gift of 1,000 deaths.
The places I've been, the people I know, the deaths I died, the seeds I sown.
Many people die a dozen deaths in this lifetime. But with bipolar,
I give way where way is to be given. I let go.
what we call bipolar,
Let life do the living.
the high highs and the low lows, we have the gift of dying 1,000 deaths
Let life do the living.
or more during one lifetime.
Luckily, I didn't have to stay there, because they finally got to the point where, like, okay, we have to abandon ship. So everybody out. The way to do that is they tell you can't force your way up. You cannot get yourself through that much onslaught of water with the way that it flows. So you rely on the guys that are above you, which are also your shipmates, and what you do is you put your hands out and they grab your hands and yank you out of the hole. It works. You know, they got me out, and I was in open air, and I was like, phew, what a relief. That was really an exciting adventure, and that was just training. So
It's kind of like the X-Men. We are part of a natural evolution of humanity. Labor and the expression of worth. What we call our illness was only our inability to comply with the great sickness that is now ravaging our species. If you cannot understand, that's okay. That's very understandable. But please, open your heart just a little further. Take a closer look at the work. If my voice doesn't resound with you, that's okay too. If you know someone who is struggling, please give them the deepest respect. If you have friends who are trying to understand themselves through a lens of pathology, your compassion may be a key to their freedom. There are many of us who are dying right now. We have seen them slip through our fingers. What can we do? We need to care for each other in a way without precedent. There is a great assembly of human beings on the horizon.
There's a new hope arising. Will we understand? Take up your cross and walk into the Holy Land. Everything we've known before will blow away. Have you felt the wind today?
We must walk toward this horizon assembly with the deepest intentional practice. We must begin to align our labor with our deepest values. We must reclaim the labor from which we have been alienated.
There's a new fire burning, turning toward the light. Time to spread the flame. We will illuminate the night. Everything we've known before will burn away. Have you smelled the smoke today?
We can no longer serve the Wedico spirit. Generations ago, when Europeans began the great genocide of the Native American people, we released that Wedico spirit in this land.
There's a new people drumming. Have you felt the beat coming from the people you may have never wanted to meet? Time to sit with them and eat from the tree of life. Have you been cut by that knife? Hey!
The Wedico spirit is that hungry ghost which devours and devours with no regard. It is insatiably hungry and demands what the spirit of life cannot give. It will take and take from us until we are all terribly humiliated. This is the humiliation that many of us have been dealing with for many years now. There must be a great unlearning. We must abstain from our Wedico practices. It is time to listen. You are not being entertained by these words. These words have purpose. These words are calling us to repentance. The mental illness that we see now is only the tip of the iceberg. Your life has great purpose. There is a higher calling. It is quite simple. There is no religion to join, but you are welcome to join all that you like. Sell your shit, give to the poor, come back, and then we'll talk. Have you ever followed the teachings of a cosmic teacher? They will mess you up. Initiations. Have you ever been on a long journey? Have you ever been not sure of where you're going to sleep tonight? I heard a teaching which said, go to the places that scare you.
They say most shark attacks happen in about 3 feet of water. But that's not what I told my daughter when she asked about the dangers out there. I told her there's no reason to be scared. Come on in, the water's nice and cool. Is it the wise man or is it the fool?
In the eye of the hurricane, you are always still. There is a wisdom that reveals itself through time and across diverse cultures and stories. There is a wisdom in the fungi that, even before photosynthesis, turn the rocks into soil. There is a wisdom in the green leaves that spins light into sugar. These perennial wisdoms are not separate from the human story. A seed goes into the ground. I am, we are, God is.
It is a choice for me to rise up, to put my shoulders back, and to set my face like flint. That is a choice. Great courage, great strength. We can't unlearn how to fly, nor can we unlearn the atomic bomb, I suppose. Our technology and the way we've integrated it into our lives now. We've taken these massive leaps forward due to these very creative neocortexes. And we must move forward with wisdom. We all know this now. There has been a lack of wisdom. There's been a lack of understanding in our progression, yes? And this must be undone first in ourselves, yes? And then we integrate the flying again.
Suicide or the state mental hospital? Over 3 decades ago, these were the only choices for Dan Greathouse. Jack, Betty, and Ross Greathouse took their loved one to Dr. Paul Harch of New Orleans, Louisiana. At a humble clinic on the Palco Boulevard, Dan's brain injury was successfully treated with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Read his unbelievable story recounting the rescue from the county jail, mental hospitals, and return to a successful life as an educational professional in Doc, I Want My Brain Back, which is available on Amazon. Dr. Harch has built a successful practice helping countless men, women, and children with hyperbaric oxygen. Also on Amazon, read about the science behind this therapy in The Oxygen Revolution, 3rd edition, by Dr. Harch and Virginia McCullough.
I did not kill myself. I'm not in a state mental hospital. I continue my successful career as an educational diagnostician in the state of New Mexico. Dad, Mom, and my brother Ross are gone now. But you, Dr. Harch, have given me the perfect birthday present for me as I turn 66 years old. You've given me back my brain and my life. I can never thank you enough.
From San Diego, we finally got through that. That was 10 days that I didn't think I was going to make it through. Of course, boot camp was 60 days that I didn't think I was going to make it through. My life has been a series of a certain number of days. I'm not sure I'm going to survive it, and then I do. It's like, how did I do that? We traveled from San Diego down to Sydney, Australia. We got liberty. We got to get off the ship. Some of the guys went and got tattoos. Some of them got really, really drunk.
That's like cliche sailors.
Oh yeah, we went to a bar and drank a lot and met girls and failed to make anything happen, but it was fun. I remember wandering around some afternoon. It was hot, and I was in the botanical gardens, and just feeling like there was something here I needed to see, something I needed to do here on this continent that I would likely never get to again. But I couldn't really understand what it was. And then we got back on the ship. From Sydney, we went down to Tasmania, to the island of Tasmania, to a town called Hobart. That's the island that's famous for the Tasmanian devil. And they're nothing like they are on the cartoon, but they do seem to run around very quickly, and they're pretty fierce. They're really small. They're like, they're tiny little things. But they're like chihuahuas, but in a rodent form. And
Hi, my name is Trav, and I'm sitting here by this stream with Henry David Thoreau today. 100 years later, we've got Alan Watts, right? I wish I would have known about him and what he had to say about Christianity. That's me picking on the guitar right there. The vast majority of the music on my channel is composed and performed by myself, Travelin' Trav. This is a funky little groove I'm playing on bass. I like to use this in a lot of my videos. I'm trying to tell you a whole lot of stuff about me so that you'll like to subscribe to my channel. So here's what I've been up to. About 5 years ago, I stepped away from everything, kind of like Henry David Thoreau, and I've just been out there sucking the marrow out of life. Lots of music, lots of philosophy. I laugh, I cry, I sing. And remember, strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Depth tribes feed the world. Labor and the expression of worth. Transrational blues.
I forgave all those deities who had crossed me as I led my body to the burial ground. Yeah, I laid my body in the ground. I sang all those songs that I'd never sung before. I blessed the rich, gave my heart the poor.
Welcome to today's episode of Labor and the Expression of Worth, where we are exploring our creative nature. Today, I'm going to speak with Matt McUne here in Amarillo, Texas. My name is Trav, and I am celebrating your creative nature. Strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Depth tribes feed the world.
So I'm here in the studio, in Matt's studio. Matt is an old friend.
it's also got something on the back.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's meant as a hanging piece. It's meant for this side not to be seen except by those in the know. It's a secret. It's a mystery. The idea speaks to the mystery of the past. It is intended to look like an artifact, an ancient artifact that one might discover in some deep archaeological dig that makes no sense. It is obviously from some other culture, perhaps from another world, and it speaks of essentially mystery and the search for understanding.
Would you rather make efforts to understand someone else's perspective or help someone else to understand you?
What does it mean to be informed? What kind of information is valuable to us?
Which social interaction are you most interested in today? Meeting new people who think differently than you, or spending time with people who you know well and trust? Today, are you the type of person who actively seeks out information that challenges your current understanding of the world, or are you searching for knowledge to confirm and solidify your current understanding? My name is Travelin' Trav, and I've been doing just that, traveling. For 8 years, I worked as a physical therapist assistant on the eastern high plains of New Mexico. Also, I've been teaching music for many, many years. What this means is that I have had the great honor of spending a whole lot of time with a whole bunch of you, one person at a time. I learned a great deal from each of you, and I learned a great deal from all of you. Thank you. I am a strongly introverted person, which means I had to reverse engineer a whole bunch of extrovert traits to do my jobs. I am also a stage performer and a public speaker. Spending all this time with you, individually and collectively, has been a powerful teaching. I haven't even yet mentioned my close friends. You know who you are. You're the ones who sat with me in the brokenness, in the tears, and we celebrated life together. Do you remember that? I seen the light in you, my friend. No one makes this journey alone. If you care to take a look at Trav's musical video archive, you can see that his work celebrates you. I have to confess something right now. All this time I was acting like a teacher that was a ruse. It turns out I'm a lifetime student. And your presence awakened in me the true teacher. Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes we get to do it scared. That's right. If you can't find your fearlessness, do it scared. Labor and the expression of worth. I had this terrible feeling one night before I went to work. I felt quite sure that I was going to die on the night shift. But I pulled my belt on tight, loaded one in the chamber, and went to do my job. My experience as police officer was limited. No one shot at me, no one punched me, but I took this lady to jail one night, and it changed me forever. My friends were all surprised when I told them that I was going to be a police officer. They were like, "You? A police officer? Nah." And I was like, "Yeah." And so I did it. It's probably more accurate to say it was done in me. If I've learned anything over these many years, it's this. There is a deeper power, and as Trav surrenders to that power deep within, peace is made, strength is realized. When I was at the police academy, those airliners crashed into those 2 tall buildings in New York City, Manhattan, 9/11. Exactly 1 year later, my youngest daughter was born. She's a healer by nature. By the time she arrived, I had already decided that I couldn't take anyone else to jail. It was the first job I'd ever had in which I didn't have to take out the trash. It was the first job I'd had that helped my young family to have medical insurance. We paid for 3 deliveries without insurance. So, practically speaking, it was a pretty big deal to leave that job. Fortunately, my wife understood, at least on some moral and ethical level, why I had made the decision to leave. I asked my shift sergeant how he stayed awake at night. We didn't get a lot of action there in Nichols Hills, and what I heard him say was this: "It's us versus them. Turn the handle on the hate faucet, fill a big caffeinated cup, that will keep you awake. Probable cause, son. Anything and everything it takes to get your eyes on the inside of that car." Another mentor told me, "I'm not telling you to profile, but you know what they look like." Dear viewer, I do not mention these things to bring disgrace upon anyone. There is a fraternal order of police, and in saying these things, I understand the risk I take. I can only describe to you what I saw in myself as a result of these instructions, and what I witnessed in me was a great breaking, a compassion that arose from within me around these difficult circumstances. I
can only honor the brotherhood by speaking the truth. Any brotherhood that requires lips sewn shut is no brotherhood at all. Into the blue. I could not agree to the great war between the us's and the thems. I took a sister to jail one night. At 2 a.m., I was called into the station to answer a phone call from county jail. "Good news," said the female detention officer on the other end of the landline. "We found a roach in that lady's vagina." "A roach?" I said. "In a vagina? Why are you calling me?" "You know, that lady you brought in earlier. I thought you'd be glad to know that we found some weed in her vagina." I didn't know what to say. The detention officer was in a celebratory mood. I was unable to celebrate. I felt sick. I felt so sad.
Fear the darkness in the room.
Oh, no, just
Somehow
so
I
sad
can't
for all of
escape
us.
with reason.
What are we doing?
My head is heavy.
This
I
did not
know
seem like a
soon.
cause for
Feel
celebration.
the turbine slowly easing.
I was silent. I forgot about the detention officer on the other end of the phone. "Officer Irwin, are you there?" she said. Yes, I said. "Thank you for the call." Officer number 655 hangs up the phone. "There's a problem with 655. He's rejecting the program. What do we do?" "We got to do something about 655. Have you ever followed the teachings of a cosmic teacher? Sometimes the great cosmic teacher presents us with what we might call a red pill, blue pill moment. You know, the Matrix, initiation ceremonies. Sell all your shit, give to the poor, come back, then we'll talk. It's like that sometimes. I can only honor the brotherhood by speaking the truth. Any brotherhood that requires lips sewn shut is no brotherhood at all. Into the blue. Have you ever followed the teachings of a cosmic teacher? Sometimes the great cosmic teacher presents us with what we might call a red pill, blue pill moment. Would you rather make efforts to understand someone else's perspective or help someone else to understand you?
Drop your nets, sons. This is gonna require your full attention. Drop them nets, boys, and follow me. Till you hate your mother and your brother and your father and your sister and your children and even your own life. You are not ready. Are you ready to follow me? I am a disruptor. Do you see?
Today, are you the type of person who actively seeks out information that challenges your current understanding of the world, or are you searching for knowledge to confirm and solidify your current understanding? You're the ones who sat with me in the brokenness, the tears, and we celebrated life together. Do you remember that? I seen the light in you, my friend. No one makes this journey alone. Jonathan is curious about morality. He closely examines his own inner life and asks us to look at ours. The science of the mind is particularly difficult to approach objectively. Two traditions, anthropology and evolutionary psychology. Jonathan respects the collective wisdom of those who have studied before him. He searches for links between these two fields, shared understandings. He and Craig Joseph composed the moral foundations theory, which may help us to understand one another a little better. Labor and the expression of worth. Today, are you the type of person who actively seeks out information that challenges your current understanding of the world, or Are you searching for knowledge to confirm and solidify your current understanding? They're both okay, and you can be the same at both times. Homo sapiens, we've been hunting for a long while. Yeah, we've been gathering too. And we learned to sing the blues into the blue. Sometimes the great cosmic teacher presents us with what we might call a red pill, blue pill moment. Neo. Neo. Wake up, Neo. The old man was silent as he sat by the fire on a small stool, his robes wrapped loosely in the way only an elder was allowed. As always, he said nothing. Jetki sat next to the elder, impatiently waiting to hear any sound, any signal that the meditation might be over. Jetki's attention was unsteady, but he continued his efforts to focus. The crackling of the embers, the sharp smell of smoking wood, birds and trees overhead, their chirps, whistles, and squawks echoing through the trees. The sunlight's orange glow behind Jetki's eyelids danced. He ignored the occasional itch on his nose. His eyelids fluttered slightly. A slight muscle spasm in his left thigh reminded him of grappling practice earlier in the day. Jetki tried to remain in the present moment, but his thoughts wandered. From the outside, Jetki looked at perfect peace, but internally his thoughts were churning, like a wood duck swimming quietly over the surface of a still pond. No appearance of effort above the water, but webbed feet kicking steadily underneath the surface. This was the struggle that was impossible to win, his mind wandering back to his childhood, his life before he had come to the monastery. Jetki had not always been Jetki. His mother had named him Jans after her grandfather.
Ken Luna gave me the violin lesson, and he told me, your pinky will come. Your pinky will one day join the others. It will be strong. It will be strong. It's amazing what happens when we encourage one another, when we tell each other of the good future. My friends, this is what we must do as a people now. We must join one another. We must disbelieve that sense of alienation and isolation. We must come together, one to another and in small groups, and help one another to see the light.
Jetki had not always been Jetki. His mother had named him Jans after her grandfather. Jans Brightgem was born into a noble family, the oldest of two sons in line to inherit his family's fortune and power. Although they were one of the least influential houses among all the nobles of their thriving city, they lived a comfortable life of leisure and sport. When Jans was 4 years old, a monk arrived in the city of Fallcrest. The old monk spent his time strolling the streets, a slight smile on his face, observing the laborers' children playing and occasionally handing a copper piece to a beggar. He knocked on the doors of the merchants, politely inquiring of the mothers, their children's ages. He patiently walked each street, visiting the shops, making sure not one was missed. He sent letters requesting visits to the noble houses.
This is our morning workout. Be strong and rooted in the center. Do not be afraid. Make a joyful noise.
The stars shone brightly in the sky, and the moon was a mere silver sliver when the old monk approached the house of Brightgem one crisp fall night. The house of Brightgem had gladly agreed to entertain the old monk's company. Jans was now approaching his 5th year, and his mother hoped that the monk would agree to become their house tutor. Jetki slowly realized that he was dreaming. His meditation teacher had said many times, the mind is impossible to control. It is only by allowing the thoughts to come and then letting them go that focus may be maintained. It is through this practice that one realizes the key that resides in every living creature. His regular teachers at the monastery taught with words, but the old man he now sat with said nothing. He never did. That was the way of the observer. It seemed to Jetki that the silence between the two of them acted as a mirror into his own soul, and Jetki was often uncomfortable with what he saw in that mirror. Although his observer never asked any questions, Jetki felt that the old man knew everything about him, all his thoughts, all his dreams, his hidden motivations. The observer was always watching. During martial arts practice, the old man sat on an upright wooden barrel, cross-legged in the corner. During meditation instruction, he sat directly in front of Jetki, gazing, without judgment, straight ahead, with no apparent emotion on his countenance. At mealtimes, he quietly ate his meager serving of rice while sitting across the table from Jetki. During daily chores, they worked side by side, Jetki and the old man.
Labor and the expression of worth.
Labor and the expression of worth. As our species teeters on this evolutionary threshold, what are the most important questions?
First of all, discerning correctly about what has worth, and then taking the absolute risk to pay full attention to it, like to seek first the kingdom. You know, drop your nets, boys, because this is going to take your full attention. That kind of attention to the divine nature, to the eternal gaze. As I understand, we do it in community, that it is enhanced as the one that is arising from within us. Now we see it manifest out there. So that's what I see in you. I see the light in you, my friend. You are that one today in this life. Thank you.
When he swam with his friends in the river, the old man observed from the bank. The observer had been with him since he arrived at the monastery at the age of 17. Jetki's mind wandered to the past once again. In the sitting room at the house of Bright Jim, on that crisp autumn evening, as the bowl moon hung just outside the window and a fire burned in the hearth, the old monk who had been searching the city for weeks requested of Jan's parents that he be allowed to accompany him to his monastery. As Jan's mother sat skeptically on the couch and his father stood by the fire, face filled with doubt, the old monk explained how his beloved Lama had died nearly 5 years ago and that he was now searching for his master's reincarnated spirit in the body of a child. After meeting Jan's, he explained, he believed that he had finally found his revered teacher. Jan's parents quickly declined the monk's request. However, they did offer to allow the old monk to stay and become his tutor. After a pointed yet respectful objection which fell on deaf ears, the old monk accepted, realizing that their offer was as close as he could come to helping his Lama to realize his key. The old monk sent word of his discovery to his monastery. The monastery sent 4 additional monks to assist with the education of young Jans. For 12 years, the elder monk and his assistants taught the child. In addition to his regular studies in history, music, mathematics, and literature, the monks also instructed Jans in the martial arts of the staff and the short sword. He received daily instruction in unarmed combat as well as the shadow arts. The old monk taught Jans what he knew of the elven language. He instructed him in meditation. The rustle of the observer's red robes and the sound of dirt sliding beneath his feet brought Jetki back to the present moment. The observer's posture was perfect, yet relaxed. Jetki slowly raised his eyes to meet the old man's. Their meditation was over. It was mealtime.
Resolution was the name of one of the movements of John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. At the end of this intense workday, I feel good. I have put in the work today, and I know I will be stronger tomorrow because I was stronger today than I was yesterday. I am seeing an evolution in my hands and in my body, and it's one that didn't just start. I'm putting in the effort for it to continue. In the name of health, in the name of joy, in the name of love, in the name of dignity, in the name of respect, I ask for a stronger back. I continue that prayer. And I am strengthening. It was mealtime. As they made their way to the common building, Jans remembered the day that he had left his name and his inheritance behind at Fallcrest. The same day that his parents had finally revealed to him what the old monk had told them on the night of the full moon. Jans was disgusted. He felt that they had deprived him of his destiny. It was then that he had decided to go live at the monastery with the 5 monks, who by now felt more like his brothers and sisters than his younger sibling. It was that day that Jan's Brightjim became Jet Key. He walked away from his family and the easy life of a noble to become an ascetic, training in the way of the key. That day was now nearly 10 years ago. Jet Key was not the only novice monk at the monastery who was thought to be the embodiment of the Lama. There was one other who had arrived long before he had come. Phelan Key had arrived 22 years ago, at 5 years of age. The discovery of 2 reincarnations had caused a division among the monks. Some could not believe that the Lama would be reincarnated as a female, while others were certain that the presence of Phelan Key was a sign that the Key was evolving their humanity. Today was the day that the Council of Elders would reveal their decision as to who would take the place of the long-dead Lama. Jet Key had allowed himself to believe that he was the one. He was certain of it. Sometimes he could feel the presence of the Old One inside him. At night, he could hear him speak. In fact, his noble upbringing would not allow him to conceive that he could be anything else but special. Reincarnation of the Great One. He knew what the decision would be today. He had no doubt in his mind. He was ready for this to be over. As Jet Key and his observer entered the decorated, open-air common building, he could see that Phelan was already there serving rice to her elder monks, her own observer closely trailing. Jet Key felt rising within himself a wave of contempt. He would be glad when this was settled. Phelan was always vainly displaying her calmness for everyone to see. In many ways, my guitar playing developed unconsciously. For instance, look at the way I have my pinky anchored on the top of the guitar. There were 2 young men that helped me to untether my pinky, Sam Carlton and Billy Strings. Notice how my hand is able to move differently once my pinky is untethered. Now I'm bracing on the bridge. I'm using the bridge as a reference point. Now you can see that my entire hand is floating above the strings. As we nurture new techniques in one area of practice, there may be new techniques that arise in other areas of our lives that have direct parallels to what we've learned in that other part of our practice. Phelan was always vainly displaying her calmness for everyone to see and her boisterously quiet service to both elders and subordinates. She consistently showed off her reasonable logic with a quiet voice during the debates, smiling at her own cleverness, and it was obvious by her lack of martial arts skills and meager display of the shadow arts that she did not have near the level of power over the key that Jet showed. Yes, he would be glad when this was over and he could regain his position.
as llama. Who invented disrespect? Was it you? Was it me? Perhaps it was us. Oops. Now, how are we going to fix this? Labor and the expression of worth. Some of us became hypersensitive to the disrespect. Genocide of the indigenous ones, enslaved ones. It was in these stories that the great breaking began for me. Me, this particular manifestation of consciousness that I call Trav. Trav willingly stood in as a self-convicted colonizer. Then it became very clear to Trav that he was also guilty of being man. You need not look further than your own wife to encounter a marginalized human being, Trav used to say. It was at university that Trav learned how the patriarchy had crushed the women. Trav could clearly see how his wife had been crushed by dysfunctional family and religious systems. Trav certainly had no problem identifying the toxic masculinity in himself. Trav's life became a living amends for the brutality of the white patriarch. One night, Trav lost his temper. He became enraged. His family was witness to a violence that arose in Trav. Thank God, in the midst of his rage, Trav came to his senses. He contacted a friend of the family. He told her what had happened. Trav started seeing a therapist. Her name was Penny. Penny introduced Trav to something called unconditional positive regard. History lesson. Carl Rogers, patient-centered therapy, unconditional positive regard. After a few visits with Penny, this is what she told Trav. Trav, you are one of the top 5 self-bludgeoners that I've ever met. And this was how I became acquainted with my own self-hate. Self-bludgeoning. Trav, said Penny, have you ever heard of Andy Dufresne? Yes, said Trav. Shawshank Redemption. I know Andy. He's the man that crawled through a tunnel of shit and came out clean on the other side, said Penny. It's time to get crawling, son. Son is mine, I added that. That night, Trav became violent with his family. It changed everything for Trav. You see, he had made a vow to himself that he would never be like his violent father. Making vows is one way that we try to control our behavior. We identify evil, we push away from it with all the strength that we have to offer. We identify what we believe to be good, and we cling to it like a mountain climber on a cliff wall. We create an image of ourselves based on our knowledge of what we know to be good and what we know to be evil. This is known as self-righteousness. The fearful hate that Trav had inherited was having its work in him. He became the Dark Father. Patriarchy, toxic masculinity, slavery, genocide, and this is about the time that Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema showed up. Andy, too. Let's get to crawling, Trav, said Andy. Carl Jung said, this is a different Carl. Yes, said Dr. Jung, this is a perfectly normal... I don't have a German accent.
Switzerland. He's from Switzerland.
Go ahead and have your discussion with the archetypes. That's what Carl said. And so Trav began crawling through the shit tunnel with Andy there. Andy Dufresne from Shawshank Redemption. Take a breath, said Pema. Things fall apart, she said. It's the nature of impermanence. Get used to the groundlessness of it all. There's no problem unless you insist that there is. Life is juicy, she said. Life is stinky, she said. And it's going to fall apart. And it's going to come back together. And it's going to fall apart again. And it's going to come back together. And that's just what it's like. Just like that. Breathing in, breathing out. You may hold yourself. You may cradle yourself like a hurt child. You may speak to your wounded child. I will hold you, dear one. You are safe now, in my arms. Do not fear. And this is how Thich Nhat Hanh showed himself in this world to Trav. He taught me to breathe. Me, this particular manifestation of consciousness that we call Trav. 1,000 times Trav believed himself to be at the end of his long, shitty crawl, and 1,000 times he recommenced the pulling of himself forward. The crawling has been perfectly exhausting, and oh, the shit that I have seen. Sacred excrement, truly, and oh, the love that I have known. Do you remember our time together, dear viewer? I hope that you see at least a reflection of the light in me, because I have certainly seen the light in you. What kind of stories are you telling yourself? You know what I did one time? I wrote a very literal, very chronological, brutally honest story of my life, and I sent copies of that story to quite a few of my friends. I was crawling. I wanted to get the fuck out of that shit tunnel. Come on. I heard that honesty would help. Here's what one of my friends said to me in response to that self-bludgeoning autobiography that I sent to some of you. Are you ready? Burn that, she said. Don't let anyone else see that. Don't ever allow your children to see it. Delete it everywhere. Too late. I've got nothing to hide. And when I say that, I am certainly not suggesting that I have lived my life in a way that approaches traditional religious piety, although I may still be vulnerable to experiencing some good old-fashioned egoic embarrassment. I have done my fearless and searching moral inventories. I can say now very certainly, the work has been done in me. Me. This particular manifestation of consciousness that you call Trav. We become aware of the tricks that we are playing on ourselves. Much of our pretending now becomes quite evident. We become wise to the vast deceptions of our own unconsciousness. The fact that we've been fooling ourselves makes us wonder, in what other manner might I still be fooling myself? Over time, this fearless and searching moral inventory grinds us up. In the midst of this self-discovery, we also discover the big empty. We may experience what appears to be a refuge in the I am. Freedom from me, freedom from you, us, and them. The crawling results in an essential exhaustion. Exhaustion brings surrender. Surrender brings depth, layer upon layer, eventually transcending the rational experience. We hover now, observing in more detail the edge of our own observable universe. Just yesterday, Einstein mourned the spooky action, faster than light communication. No, it cannot be. And today, thanks to Mr. Webb's telescope, we get to reapproach astrophysics. Isn't she lovely? Oh my God. Love never fails. Never, ever, 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 and ever, never labor and the expression of worth. If your personal beliefs deny what's objectively true about the world, then they're more accurately called personal delusions. Neil deGrasse Tyson. At this point in our evolution of consciousness, it seems that a literal read of what we call objective reality is every bit as problematic as attachment to the literal understanding of any sacred text. Fundamentalism, as we have discovered, will emerge in every form to which we give sufficient attention. Did I mention that that was problematic? Problematic. It's a word that I was introduced to at university. Yes, the university. My children's mother is a fully vetted and peer-reviewed philosopher of Victorian literature, and I am Jude the Obscure. Our adventure into university was an essential waypoint on our paths to enlightenment. As we stepped away from fundamentalist Christianity, we sought refuge in the university, and refuge we certainly found. There's a little college cowtown on the eastern high plains. There's not much to do there, and it hardly ever rains. The bus she leaves early, the bus she drives slow, and she makes a short stop in Portales, New Mexico. You can go back to college, finish your degree, write 3-chord songs about living life simply. It's a place you might go when you haven't a choice. But if you look carefully, you might find your voice. We were held out there on the eastern high plains. We ran out there like Moses after he killed that Egyptian and buried his ass in the sand. I had just completed one of the most intense educations of my young life as I had stepped onto the city streets with a handgun and a badge. After exactly 1 year as a police officer, I resigned, saying, I will not be the hand of an unjust justice system. We were given a new life there on the plains of eastern New Mexico. 10,000 years ago, the Blackwater Draw drew. 10,000 years later, baby, the Blackwater Draw is drawing you too. Clovis, man, out there all those years ago, they say it was like pine trees and wetter back then. There were some big mammals out here, and they were together as a tribe hunting them. I said a moment ago that I felt like Moses running out to the desert. That wasn't just a convenient metaphor. As I had refused my service to the justice system, I was also being led through some painful initiation ceremonies with what I would eventually come to call fundamentalist Bible Belt Christianity. I had come to view the church as part of the injustice that I had witnessed from within the system. It was all melting together, iniquity, a king responsible for the theft of a beggar. I was told that I was a mouthpiece for the devil. Then I was led out the door of the church building, paraded past a line of men with disappointed eyes, their arms folded in disapproval. They were the fathers. They had adopted me into the kingdom. It was time for me to learn a lesson. It's all very natural for the church to crucify the sons. In fact, it is precisely the story of Jesus. 1, love is born into the status quo. 2, status quo crucifies love. 3, love is resurrected. It's like a seed that goes into the ground and dies. Plant wisdom. It's everything the Christian faith promises, right? Don't be surprised when people say all sorts of crazy shit about you. Love your enemies. Pray for those who hurt you. Bless those who curse you. If someone says, walk a mile with this pack, walk 2. If someone slaps you on the cheek, turn the other and say, here we go. And somehow, I guess it's about not being a victim. Whoa. Plant-based wisdom. We did experience a resurrection out there on the eastern high plains. It's all true, and it's really simple. Knowing Christ is a surrender to the groundless transience of natural life cycles and forgiveness for the brutal initiation ceremonies of our own invention. The cross shows us our own cruel nature. Making peace with our own cruelty is what is commonly known in Christian circles as taking up your own cross. We suffered a death at the hand of the church and the state, and God resurrected us on the eastern high plains. This is a very helpful piece of metaphysical construction. Fearlessness is essential, or at least the capacity to face our fears courageously. Do it scared, they say. Do it knowing that you might die. Do it knowing that there is always a resurrection. Do it knowing that death isn't a real thing. Sell all your shit. Give to the poor. Come back, then we'll talk. Jesus. That's what he said to one dismayed rich young man. When I sold all my possessions like that, and I was approached by the terrified men, by the terrified fathers. They warned me, and they were not incorrect. I don't know how you count the cost of something like that, but it turns out when you follow with abandon the teachings of that great cosmic one, then the matrix may become clearly evident for what it is. The zeros and the ones, you start to see the knowledge of good and evil, the rights, the wrongs, and we start to see that this is exactly the freedom that we were given, is the freedom to transcend the falseness of that matrix, of the zeros and the ones, the ifs, the thens. We are transcending that reason and coming into the cosmic state of consciousness, which is what Christ was opening up for us.
If you don't become the ocean, you're going to be seasick every day. Leonard Cohen.
They say most shark attacks happen in about 3 feet of water. But that's not what I told my daughter when she asked about the dangers out there. I told her there's no reason to be scared. Come on in, the water's nice and cool. Is it the wise man or is it the fool who moves beyond the tidal pool?
We were kayaking in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of La Jolla, and we were seasick. We had these wetsuits on, and they were stinky, and Max, our tour guide, said, "Jump in the water, it's cool, you'll feel a lot better." I had this idea that whenever you jump into water, there's always a great white shark about to eat you, but I didn't want my daughter to get that idea, so I jumped right in.
We dangle our feet to be seen from down below, although we know there may be predators down there. There are so many reasons not to go in. There are poisonous creatures and the dreaded dorsal fin.
When I was a kid, when we'd meet a great white shark, it was impossible. It was going to chase you around the ocean. It was going to jump up on your boat. It was going to eat you. Today, it's a different story. We're just booping these sharks on the nose, and it's just kind of commonplace now. It's different. I have a friend, Matthew McUne. He is a prolific and profound artist. The scope of his work is immense. I had the privilege of spending a lot of time with this guy, lots of play dates with our young kids. His work is profound and speaks volumes to me. Please check out Matthew's work. Sometimes we meet people who help us to discover a facet of our divine nature that was before inaccessible. Matt is one of these people to me. Matt's art is liberating. Matt is a liberator. Matt's expression from the depths helps us to see the world from a different perspective. I am now a witness to the divine nature as it arises from within many of my friends. Matt has these sculptures that speak of something ancient, something lost long ago in us. These sculptures speak of a great mystery, something profound that we are to rediscover and integrate in ourselves. As we witness this divine awakening in ourselves and in the other, we are liberated from the shame that would otherwise separate us, exile, and destroy us. Art can channel that power, the creative nature, shame-busting love.
We can bless that creative nature in one another. We can call it out. We can encourage one another. We can be enlightened by the creative nature that is right here in our midst. When two or more of us gather with the intention of communing with our creative nature, that nature is in our midst. We are no longer separate.
So I started to feel that sensation even stronger there in Tasmania, and it was kind of a longing. But then I got back on the ship and we left and we headed down into the ice to Antarctica. Somebody had told me that we're coming up to an ice field and we're getting ready to go into the ice, and that's a significant thing. You go from open water into the ice. Now our ship was designed to break ice up to 25 feet thick, so we could take a lot of ice. And we were out in open water, and I went up on the deck, just this big ice field, and we were just steaming toward it. It kind of felt like we were going to run aground. You know, it's like we're heading toward the land, and that's not where boats tend to go. Then we hit the ice, and it was very thin at the beginning, you know, and it got thicker. And so we hit the ice, and it was like, oh, okay, it wasn't something to be afraid of at all. Then I went downstairs, the level where our living quarters were. When we started to really break ice, I remember it was about 10 feet thick when I was in my rack. I was in my bed, port side of the ship, 3 of us in that stack. I was in the middle. Anyway, I remember laying in bed and we hit some thick ice, and it sounded to me what I imagined tearing steel would sound like. If you had a thick piece of steel and you could tear it in half, that's kind of what I thought was happening. And so I immediately got up and went out onto the deck, and I was watching these chunks of 10 feet thick, maybe a pickup truck sized, just rolling across the as the ship moved past, the ice would churn and just roll across the side. It made me trust the ship a lot more. Enormous pieces of ice that we were just rolling past with no trouble at all. And I mean, there was this knowledge that of course the ship could handle it, but then to see it happening, you're like, yeah, we're just pushing right through that ice. It's not going to stop us. Powerful. Yeah.
Shame separates, creative nature unifies. It's all part of a very natural cycle of life and death in this binary universe. In this binary system, we are overwhelmed by the infinite combinations of information as expressed in the ones and the zeros. It crushes us now in many forms: the cross, trauma, shame, separation. The death that shame brought will now nourish us in our resurrection, just as the roots of a tree draw nutrients from the rot and the decay of the soil. Matt's art is a part of a great message that is now being spoken to and through all of humanity. Stay tuned for a deeper look into Matt's work and some fascinating stories about his journey. Man overboard. What is it like to jump ship? You won't want to miss the next episode of Labor and the Expression of Worth. I thank God for people who can describe to us what it is like to turn our attention toward that which we know has value, even when that means that we are alienated from the status quo. That's Matt. Tune in to the next episode of Labor and the Expression of Worth to hear Matt's story. Much love to all of you. Thank you for your loving support. Sham esep arat es. Shame separates. Creative nature unifies. Labor and the Expression of Worth.
We got to Antarctica. We got to McMurdo Station, and then we had to take some helicopter fuel out to this remote base, dropped anchor and the gangplank, and actually ran a hose from the ship all the way to this bladder. It was a good 5-minute walk from the ship to the actual base. As the low men on the totem pole, we each had a certain section of the hose that while they were pumping fuel through it, we had to walk up and down and make sure that nothing leaked. Me and 4 or 5 other guys had the night watch, so we were there from midnight to 4. And in Antarctica in the summertime, that's daylight. So, it was perfectly bright out. Something happened to the pump and they had to stop pumping. So they were working on the pump. We spent the rest of the time just hanging out. At one point, we all just sort of, we'd all been walking around, and the beach was rocky. It didn't have sand. It was just pebbles everywhere, so it crunched everywhere you go. But we all eventually found a little spot where we could sort of nestle in, and everybody found a little place, and we all just laid down and took naps. During my nap, I had a dream that I can remember vividly to this day. I don't know if it illuminated or if it reminded me, or if it just was really vivid and really pertinent. And basically, it spoke to the longing that I felt, that there was something in Australia that I had to see, or something I had to do. And based on that dream, finally, 2 months after we arrived in Antarctica, we finally left. Our mission there was done. So we traveled from McMurdo to the city of Adelaide, Australia, which is on the... Australia has this weird thing. It loops around. I mean, it's got the Western Australia, and then it's got Eastern Australia, and Eastern Australia goes down further than Western Australia. So Adelaide sits at the corner, right where it goes from thick to thin, and Canberra is in between Melbourne. Melbourne is at the tip. Sydney's on the edge, and Canberra is the capital. That's right between the two. And then Adelaide is sort of opposite of that, where the little corner is. And then Perth, Australia, is on the other tip. So Perth is sort of the opposite of Sydney. And so we went to Adelaide, and I remember that sensation got even stronger. And then we left Adelaide and went to Perth. We're there for 5 days or something like that. So the last night, I was in a hotel room. A couple of us got a room, and we went out drinking and carousing. And
Sailors.
The sailors do,
Sailors do.
Yeah. Some of us were more sailor-like than others. I wasn't as sailor-like that trip. Well, and part of it was I was struggling with this decision that I had to make.
You had something.
I had to make a choice. The docks were a little bit removed from the town, so you had to take the train to get to the docks. And it was a pretty common train, so I mean, it went pretty frequently. Instead of boarding the train that took me to the docks, I boarded the train that took me south. And I mean, it was that close to when I reported. I could have gotten a much better head start if I'd really intended to.
Labor and the expression of worth is coming to the eastern high plains.
Well, thank you, God, for cruise control.
I was a 28-year-old husband and the father of 3 children, 4 and under, when I arrived at the New Mexico Christian Children's Home. I was deeply disillusioned, feeling betrayed by family, church, and state. I am always immensely grateful for the opportunity that we were given by Charles Anderson, Rod Self, Darwin Culpepper,
Butch and Junie.
all the grace that we were shown as a young family. I remember that first Christmas with my 3 young kids and just being so grateful that we had this little tree and a safe place to be. Just down the road from us, thank God, I met this man and his family. This is Ken Luna, and he had a wall full of instruments, and we started playing music together, and I was so incredibly grateful to meet the Lunas. In fact, this music that you're listening to right now, this composition, is Ken Luna's piece. It's called Mike's Waltz, and I loved it so much that I recorded it. I asked him if I could use it. He said yes. Labor and the expression of worth. Travelin' Trav is a singer, songwriter, poet, essayist, metaphysical therapist, teacher, healer, father, and an advocate for the homeless and neurodivergent. He is an encourager, a deeply flawed human being, and a somewhat reluctant, yet grateful, follower of the one that we have called Jesus. Trav's working practice is now an integration of his diverse career experiences, which includes time in the military, police, academia, and physical therapy. His personal journey to overcome genetically inherited trauma makes him an expert on mental health issues and trauma recovery. Humanity is making the leap into the non-dual. We are moving beyond the binary into a more fluid state. This is evident in our most recent explorations of gender identification. In the depths of Christ, there is no male or female. Travel and Trav is developing educational materials which encourage the alignment of our rational and mystical senses.
I'm here with Ron Shipp at the Reynolds Art Gallery here in Portales, New Mexico. My life celebrates Ron's work, really, and we got to work together playing guitar for a lot of years. I mean, when I taught here,
it's a mutual celebration.
Yes.
Labor and the expression of worth. I will play on the string. I will learn how to sing. I will find myself again. Yes, I'm coming. The most stable of selves that I ever knew had a knack for embracing instability.
I'm going to let these die on the stem because I want the seed.
Perennial wisdom. There is a wisdom that reveals itself through time and across diverse cultures and stories. There is a wisdom in the fungi that, even before photosynthesis, turn the rocks into soil. There is a wisdom in the green leaves that spins light into sugar. These perennial wisdoms are not separate from the human story. A seed goes into the ground. There is a great devotion that I see in the generation that arose from mine. When I get to spend time with these people, I am filled with great hope. I hear the perennial wisdom coming from the sons and the daughters. We study, we practice, we devote ourselves to that which we know to have value. Sometimes, to enter into communities, we have to go through initiation ceremonies. My oldest daughter has been studying for a very long time so that she could learn under music healers. The illusion of time is very strong in this world. It is one that we seem to have to work with. Some say we must do the shadow work. We must somehow make peace with this binary realm, with this world of offs and ons, ones and zeros, rights and wrongs. We're pretty sure that quantum AI is not going to save us. Who knows what it may bring, however. Matter, matriarchy, matrix, Mother Mary.
Not chased at all. I didn't know if I was going to be chased, and there was I might be chased. Kind of funny because that was the presumption that I was important enough to chase, which turns out I was not. They decided just to use telephone. I went mostly along the southern edge of Australia. At one point, I went north to a town called Kalgoorlie. I think it's an Aboriginal word, but it was a gold mining town. And that's where there was a train that there's like one track that goes across the middle of the continent from this town to eventually Sydney. And that was the train I wanted to get on, but I didn't have enough money for it. So I went all the way up to the Kalgoorlie, and then I went all the way back down to the coast again and continued hitchhiking along the coast.
You literally walk about in Australia.
Mm-hmm. I did.
I can relate to the law. I wonder if that's part of an initiation ceremony. That some of us may answer and some of us may not. I spent time in the military. I went to basic training in Fort Sill. And I had that sense that something is not quite right in all of this for myself. I screamed at the top of my lungs and tried to play the part of the soldier honestly. Like when I got there, I was trying, and then That was the first emotional breakdown I ever a public emotional breakdown. I was screaming at one moment at the top of my lungs, not in a bad way,
right?
I was instructed.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I found myself just kind of all of a sudden sobbing as we were marking time in the breezeway.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't go well.
No, they
when
don't.
You're in the armed forces and you begin uncontrollably crying. I had on a red armband. I was a squad leader, and that armband was immediately torn off my shoulder, and I was shamed. It was a point of shame, and everyone began to look at me very differently. I was respected, and then the crying. There's no crying in the army.
Yeah, that put an end to it. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I don't know how I knew this or why I knew it or if I had seen this happen to somebody else, but I knew that if I had stayed on the ship, that I wouldn't survive. That not so much physically die, but that something was going to die. You never know what could happen or what might have happened if things went differently. But for me, it was a life or death situation, and it wasn't an immediate termination. But I knew that if I didn't make this, if I made the wrong choice, and at the time I didn't know which choice was the wrong choice.
To be true to am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah.
To be true to yourself.
Whether to be true to myself and go on this walkabout in Australia, or to be true to my commitment, my contract, and stay on the ship, knowing that I might die.
Right. That's a great illustration of what personal responsibility may or may not mean. Your father was also in the Coast Guard, was he not?
Yes, he was.
So there was a lineage.
There was a lineage there, yeah.
Definitely an expectation. I mean, I can imagine. I didn't know your father, but I would imagine there was probably some kind of expectation of what personal responsibility meant in the midst of that. I mean, that's kind of traditionally. Like
Yeah. Yes, it was.
Family,
yeah, there definitely was, and excuse me, he was pretty disappointed.
That's one of the hardest things.
That was another thing that was, yeah, and that was something that I was aware of at the time. I mean, I knew full well my dad had been in the Coast Guard. I knew that if I jumped ship, what that would mean to him, and it was devastating, and I didn't want to do that. But at the time, I didn't see that I had a lot of choice in the matter.
We are born into this matrix, this universe of fluctuations and instability. Musical tones are composed of a consistently varying wave. Waves are simple and consistent binary patterns. Consistent fluctuation produces what, to humans, sounds like a steady tone. Layered tones produce harmony. Harmony, relationships between varying frequencies occupying the same time-space. The most stable of selves that I ever knew had a knack for embracing instability, labor, and the expression of worth. It truly was an honor to be invited into this musical communion that these three men have been establishing. Just a lot of sensitivity between them. They have their stuff together. It was really a great time to bring my mandolin and my fiddle in to just kind of create with these guys. Also, I want to thank once again Enchantment Vineyards, and especially the hospitality that we received from James Michael Itzinga that day.
Same hand, years later.
And this is called Fabric of Time.
Yeah, fling me across the fabric of time and the seas of space. Make me nothing, and from nothing, everything.
Whittled that down from the same dowel rod, quarter-inch dowel rod. So we were talking about different seasons.
Seasons. The search for 12 has begun. The video you are about to watch is one part in a series, Labor and the Expression of Worth. This series represents an initiation ceremony, a ceremony in which we are all participating together. Whether we like it or not, we stand now, as a species, at an evolutionary threshold. And we are all living with this tension, the seriousness that this moment seems to be generating in our collective consciousness. Together, we must understand ourselves as part of a larger story. Otherwise, we are very susceptible to fear, which is exactly what we are all trying so desperately to get over. But action generated by desperation can never overcome fear. Any attempt to change ourselves or to change our neighbor, which is motivated by fear, shame, vengeance, etc., these abstract words which represent the diverse symptoms of suffering, all of our desperate attempts only add to the problem. Gasoline on a fire, as we say. So, what do? Well, repentance is truly what is called for. I use that word, repentance, intentionally here because I'm an artist and a poet and a mystic and sometimes somewhat of a dilettante intellectual, and I realize that the misuse of that word by the many abusive faces of fundamentalist religion has really turned us off at best, and in many instances we have been seriously injured or even killed. But it is this very resentment that we carry with us, even some of us who consider ourselves super woke. It is this very resentment of that shadow which we must face right now if we really want to get over ourselves.
Our infant minds are born into this world. Some say we have no choice in where and how we're born. I've heard others say that we choose to come into this life. I prefer the second. Because if I have not chosen this, it seems that I am a victim of this.
You said you were trying to answer a call on your life. Yes?
Yes.
What was that like? Where'd that come from?
Must have came from when I first said the Lord's Prayer in this little church called Wayside Chapel. And I said the Lord's Prayer, and my pastor told me, he said, Adam, God has a call on your life. And from that moment on, I always believed that God had some kind of calling on my life. And I've tried different things to fulfill, to answer that call. They might have been the right things at the time. I don't know. Maybe there's been several calls. Maybe there's always a different call, Mm-hmm. Maybe as long as you stay present, the call changes and morphs as you go. The call may be different tomorrow.
Yes. All right.
LMTEOW.
This is a paper map, kids. I started last night in Lewisburg and drove up to somewhere like in here. No, like right in here. It was a hard night travel. Didn't feel very good. So now I went through Hillsboro, and now I'm taking 39. This is where the lady at the visitor center there at New River said this was a nice place to be. So, reading a map. This is a paper map.
map, kids. In the eye of the hurricane, you are always still. How will you hold me when the pain comes like this? She looked me in the eye, betrayed me with a kiss. She said, "You cannot walk on water with a tongue sharp to kill." In the eye of the hurricane, you are always still.
Yes! Yes! Yeah! Woo! Shelter! Shelter! Not just shelter, but that. This is art. I got my boots on the ground. I got my boots on the ground. I got my boots on the ground.
Have you ever been on a long journey? Have you ever been not sure of where you're going to sleep tonight? I heard a teaching which said, go to the places that scare you. Go out past the point of no return, said the great teacher.
You asked me what happened afterwards, and I haven't answered that question yet. This seems like a reasonable time to bring that up, but I turned myself in after 2 months of being absent without leave in Australia. I turned myself into the U.S. consulate in Sydney, Australia.
Wow, that walk.
It was rough.
That walk through that door must have. Oh, you're turning yourself in. Literally.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, I'm guilty of committing a federal crime, and I'm here to answer for it.
I left my post. You
Yeah,
have to abandon your post. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they contacted my ship, and we got an airplane ticket from Sydney, Australia to Seattle, Washington, and flew me back the next day. And when I stood a court martial, and actually it wasn't a court martial. It was one step below that. It was one step lighter than that. It was called a summary, a captain's mast, essentially. A summary.
That seems quite kind.
Yeah, it was, and part of that was because of my exemplary service and my lack of having done anything wrong before that.
Okay.
And they said, this is pretty awful, but you've been good up till now. And they had me go see a psychiatrist, and then sentenced me to 30 days, not years, 30 days in the brig for leaving my post. And so I served that. I got off 5 days early for good behavior because I was a model prisoner.
There are many faces in which the great teacher may manifest. Who are your greatest teachers today? Have you witnessed that great teacher as it arises in you? Just who do you think you are? Did you really believe that you were less than divine? That great teacher is you. These are the lessons that we learn when we follow the instructions of the great teacher. Initiations. Sell all your shit, give to the poor, come back, then we'll talk. This is what Jesus said to a rich young man. Have you ever followed the teachings of a cosmic teacher? What's that like? Unfortunately, all these teachings lead to death. There is no other possible outcome. Anyone who says differently is trying to sell you something. Yes, that's right. We walk straight into the death.
We go to the places that scare us. We put on our armor and walk into the dragon's lair. Why? Because that is where the treasure is, silly. And do you know what that dragon is going to do? He's going to eat your ass. You're going to die so many deaths in that stinking dragon's den. You're going to come to the end of it so many times. It's going to be like Groundhog Day. Over and over again, you are going to get smoked. Can you see me there? There I am in that uniform. I was 27 years old and I was ready to serve. Ah, the things we learn about humanity when we put ourselves in service. Until we know the oppressor in ourselves, we make very poor liberators. This was one of Carl Jung's messages to his students. Maybe you also know what it is like to have your ass handed to you by the dragon. Maybe you know what it is like to choose the dangerous path. There is a surrender to the death that results in rebirth, enlightenment, realization of self. And this is what the great teacher has promised. We walk into death by faith. We face our fears courageously. As we release our attachments to this life, we are liberated. We understand now. We become that fearless one. Each death died, a seed planted. We become the resurrection, labor, and the expression of worth. It is quite simple. There is no religion to join, but you're welcome to join all that you like. You are curious, aren't you? That's a really good thing. We can choose to encourage one another in this very natural cycle of death and rebirth. Knowing this cycle in ourselves is how Christ is known in us. It's like this. There's a seed. It goes into the ground. It dies. It puts down roots into the soil, the rot, the decay, that which was going to kill us. We start drawing nourishment from the deaths that we've died. We put out leaves that begin to photosynthesize light, spinning light into sugar. Light, both wave and particle. Wave, the whole; particle, the individuated nature. It's very natural. We see this death and rebirth cycle expressed in everything and everyone. All things become the teacher of God. I do not speak of these things lightly, although I make jokes. And I do not lightly offend. But sometimes the offense is necessary to jolt us into awakening. I realize that I need to stop talking now because you should just watch this bird for the rest of this. Little deaths, labor, and the expression of worth. This is a paper map, kids. In the eye of the hurricane, you are always still. Labor and the Expression of Worth is Trav's compassionate philosophical container which creates the necessary inner space to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously.
Labor and the expression of worth is a context in which we may align our work with one another around our deepest common values. We must educate, strengthen, and encourage one another. Strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Deep tribes can feed the world. It is essential that the consciousness level of our species is deepened. We need a new perspective from which to solve the diverse and many problems that humanity has created for itself.
Which social interaction are you most interested in today? Meeting new people who think differently than you, or spending time with people who you know well and trust? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This is the mute. With your fretting hand, you dampen the strings. With your strumming hand, we play downstrokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we add upstrokes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Marking time to the rhythm of your muted guitar. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Music, the universal language.
25 days in the brig, and then I went
Go back to.
and then I went back to my ship.
Oh, you went back. What was that like going back to the
Weird.
ship?
It was
The ending?
exactly, yeah. It was very uncomfortable. Let's see. I got out of the brig in June and left, and then it wasn't till October that I got discharged. So I was there for 6 months. 6 months.
Was there were people like laughing and slapping you on the back, like, hey, wow, good,
Some people, some of the guys were like, "Damn, that took some balls, Mister," and then most everybody though didn't. They were like, "You are a loser," and
That's not how it should.
that's not how. Yeah, people doing. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not encouraged being drawn up.
Right. Yeah, and I admitted that I was wrong. I, openly, I was like, people would ask me about it. I was like, I did a stupid mistake. It was something.
But yet, it was not a mistake.
It wasn't.
You weren't answering it.
It wasn't a mistake for me.
There was a doubleness there.
Yeah,
that
but
I'm so familiar with.
Yeah, but I had to tell them that
You're back to kind of like
you
to
got to
survive in that.
Exactly.
It's a survival mechanism.
It's a survival
you have
mechanism.
to kind of be like, and I know, oh my gosh, I know that
Mhm.
so well. When you don't really quite fit, and for me, you saying that just.
Yeah, you felt it. You felt it exactly.
Yeah,
You're
I
like,
know it. Not
it's
just in the, like in the military or the police, but like almost like in life in general. Like I've been repenting. I've been apologizing for myself and who I am,
mm-hmm.
and I've been trying to join all of my life, seeing people who have joined and seeing that, look, they're happy. It's okay. Can't you be? And I think joining the military, joining the police, in a sense, kind of like all of my efforts to assimilate, to be a good citizen, to have the job. There's so much of my life I spent.
I remember us talking about that one time. You came back you had spent a week or two or a month or whatever it was in a facility, and you came back to Carroll. This was after, and you were like, this time it's going to work. And I remember talking to you days afterward, and you're just like, you were in this thralls of devastation. I mean, you were just, I don't want to say you were hollowed out, but you were definitely a different person than I had known for a while, because you were trying to assimilate into this system that had driven you to that mental breakdown, but that you didn't have anywhere else to go. And I felt so helpless and wanting to help you and wanting to do something to give you back whatever. I don't know. I remember just feeling heartbroken for you and knowing that there was, I don't know. I'm not even sure how to express it, and I remember there being a moment when I wanted to take Travis and encompass him
Big hug.
and give him the big hug and make things better, because I knew that you were trying to go there. I don't think I could have articulated it at that point, but you were trying to assimilate into this situation which you didn't fit, and that was hard to watch. I wish that I had done something. I wish there was something I could have done. I don't know, even in hindsight, if I could have done anything.
Thank you for saying that. And I think that is kind of the mission that I'm on right now. Is I'm still trying to find that true expression in which I am at home.
Yeah.
I'm still, I'm 47 years old, whatever that means, and I'm still searching for a true expression.
I can tell you what 52 means. It means I have to pee again. Because I don't know if that's all 52-year-olds or just, actually not quite 52, but I'm going to be there soon, so I'll be right back. Nobody really understands how decisions are made and how human beings actually work. Another perspective is that everybody is pretty much locked into what they do and how they do it by what they've done and what was going on around them. But it's hard to return after making a leap of faith. It's hard to come back and admit that didn't turn out the way you expected it to. Because my trip didn't turn out the way I expected it to. And I had to return and answer for what I did.
Well, we were talking about what it's like to get back on the ship and say I was wrong.
Yeah.
And
well, I couldn't do it. I lasted 6 months. Actually, it wasn't even that long. It was probably about 4 months, and then started the process of getting discharged. And I went to the dock on the ship and just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be on the ship and be a shipmate. I don't know exactly how much I told him about that, but I expressed to him essentially that I was no longer a part of the crew, and that I was a danger to not that I was going to hurt myself, but nobody trusted me, and so I don't remember exactly how we managed to get the honorable discharge, but it was honorable. It wasn't a dishonorable discharge, but the wording was something along the lines of unsuitable. So I was discharged, but I was unsuitable for re-enlistment. So
and that's basically what you had told the doctor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm unsuitable. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not fitting in.
It doesn't work. I can't make this work. And
all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty together again.
If going to another unit would have been better, I honestly think, because rumors travel fast, news travels fast in organizations like that. I don't think I could have gone anywhere and been accepted. And that's why I decided I had to leave. I had severed that connection, and it wasn't going to grow back.
When I asked you to tell that story, I really didn't realize where it was. Your story has led me to kind of this reckoning or this facing right now, kind of experiencing through your story, kind of what that's like to jump ship, to get back on the ship, to say I was wrong. And I think my life feels like that a lot, right? I've jumped ship quite a few times, and then I've always always gotten back on and said I was wrong and sorry. I'm gonna try to be a crewmate. And I know that I believe I need community. I need family. I want to be responsible. I want to meet my personal responsibilities in the midst of community. I believe that's essential for humankind. I mean, for all of us, we need, for our mental health, for our physical health, so that we don't end up, if you don't want to be homeless, I mean, we must find some way. And I think that's what's been confounding me for so long now is I think probably why I've beat myself up in so many ways, because I feel so alone. They say that the root of all suffering is the illusion of separateness, that I'm separate from everyone else, that I'm the illusion of the separate self. And we have these institutions like military and other, even the healthcare. You join a job where we join these organizations, and then hopefully somehow we have a sense of belonging,
right?
And we're hopefully we're able to answer our own true calling within that institution in a deep enough way to where we're satisfied. I think it's kind of commonly accepted at this point that there are people who are born who just kind of can't find that or find it difficult to have that satisfaction with the status quo.
Right.
Some of those people, some of us, end up doing violent things. Like you can see people who are so alienated that they end up blowing up a federal building or something like that. There's like, well, I'm going to make myself relevant, right? Like, I'm not relevant. We see this in school shootings, perhaps, or people feeling this aloneness and then but we have to be relevant and we need to be heard and to be seen. And so we find some kind of terrible, violent way of doing that. I've certainly felt that violence I felt the violence in me, like I said earlier, like it's directed toward me, even from me, directed toward me. And then I think there are probably many different ways we try to find that relevance. We can become people pleasers to the extreme, trying to just please those people in our lives at the cost of our true selves. I mean, in many ways, I wish there was a ship I could jump back on and say, I was wrong, please take me back. But it seems like every time I find that ship and make my confession, that at some point I end up kind of jumping ship again in some fashion. I don't know when that stops or how that stops for me, or if it's something that needs to stop, or I'm ready. If there's an initiation, is there eventually a way kind of back into the tribe,
right?
Rejoin the tribe. I believe that all of us need to be in a tribe. We need to have the fortitude to kind of bear our cross, to be able to hang on the cross with forgiveness. Is like, that's kind of the metaphor that speaks to me. It's like this, we've got to have that kind of practice, that kind of discipline, that kind of love, that kind of strength to understand that the universe is unfair and kind of sick and sad in so many ways, but to see through that unfairness, to forgive it all, and then somehow in that we experience this resurrection. I mean, these are principles that I think are telling a universal story somehow. I hope, or unless maybe maybe I'm in the process of letting all of that story go. I don't know. I mean, right now that's still the form in which I make sense of the world.
Right.
There are people out there that say, no, that the whole cross story is totally fucked. You need to totally fucking let that go, because no, we're not called to hang on crosses, so, but I don't know. It's still
right.
It's still like, that still speaks to me, God knows I've left I tried to, that's one of those ships I jumped, fuck that. I'm jumping ship. This is all fucked. And then I reintegrated all that whole damn story. I'm mostly thinking about lunch right now.
Lunch sounds like a great idea.
Matt, thank you for having this conversation with me. I'm saying this,
Yeah.
as documented.
Right, yeah.
This is my documented gratefulness to you. It'll be more to come after we turn off the recorders. But thank you for having this conversation with me. Thank you for being my friend. And I just hope this conversation can bring some kind of context. I think that our stories of ship jumping can somehow help. Even if we are cautionary tales, if my life is a cautionary tale, may the context of my cautionary tale bring depth and a better experience for someone.
Bring a light to somebody's journey that
Right.
they didn't see before.
Yes.
And I hope so as well. As for mine as well. For both of ours. This has been great. I want to do more of these.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that because I'm feeling the same way. This has been. I love that we're documenting it. I'm just going to put it up. I'll let you see it first and make sure everything is good. But I think you would probably know if you had said something that you can tell me. I can edit. I will
Right.
edit
Yeah.
shit out
Yeah. I mean, you're probably going to have to. There's a lot of.
We talked for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I think, and we have more video on top of that. So.
Yeah. So there's plenty of lots of material, but I also know that not all of it's. I mean, in the process of making a video, it's not all usable stuff, and some things are more relevant in one format than another. So, oops, I'm gonna